Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruel thing my wife did. After cheating with a board member at Lakeshore Crest in Winnetka, she used her connections to have me banned from her country club like I was a stain she could wipe off. Here's how it happened. I'm Marcus Ellison, a Southside Chicago electrician who believed vows meant something. Tasha, my wife, had a glossy smile and a gift for rooms that measured worth in quiet glances and last names. The club loved her charm. I thought that meant they loved who she loved, too. Then I found a text thread. Midnight, champagne, bring the spare key. And the next week a certified letter arrived, declaring me inconsistent with the club's standards. Not fitting the image, the concierge murmured when I tried to walk in for Sunday brunch. Right there by the brass revolving door, my wife turned her shoulder, and a board member I didn't know yet. Langston Price. Watched like the whole scene was entertainment. Tasha didn't whisper. She said it clearly, like coaching a child. This place is important to me, Marcus. Don't ruin it. She never looked back when security escorted me off the property in front of our friends. My cheeks burned worse than the wind coming off Lake Michigan. By the time I reached my car, the rumor that I was unstable had already started to travel. In the following weeks, the ban metastasized into something bigger. A city subcontract I'd been lining up for months fell apart after a background call to a donor on the club's board. I got a regretfully we're going in a different direction email that read like a condolence note. My groomsmen texted me to take the high road and keep your voice down. One even said, "She's moving up, man. Don't make this messy." Tasha's parents returned my tools stacked in bins on the porch like I was a contractor who left a job half done. Nobody asked what I'd seen on her phone. I confronted Tasha once, in our kitchen in Bronzeville, the sun laying a clean ribbon across the table. "I saw the messages," I said. She didn't deny it. She took a breath like she was about to dive, and then said, "You're not on my level anymore. I need a different life." I asked if there was a way back, and she tilted her head, genuinely curious, then shook it. "Don't show up at the club again," she added, soft as a warning. "It'll hurt my standing." She said it like my existence was bad table manners. I moved out to a room above a muffler shop off 75th and Stony Island. Nights were loud with teeth-rattling bass when cars revved for no reason. I took every emergency job I could find. Flickering panels, blown breakers, rewiring a basement in a bungalow that smelled like bleach and old newspapers. I ate out a plastic bag in the truck, cold chicken wings, half a banana. When winter pressed down, I kept the engine idling for heat until I learned to wrap my sleeping bag with a painter's tarp to hold warmth. I measured my life by which coffee shop let me sit the longest. Tasha didn't check on me, not once. She posted smiling photos from charity dinners in Lincoln Park. Langston, sometimes visible at the edge of a frame. A former co-worker forwarded a private message from her. I wish him the best, but he couldn't keep up. The words landed sharper than any blade. My only sibling, my brother Julian, called to say I needed to stop acting like a victim. He was trying to help. I think it still hurt like a brick. I learned to keep the phone face down and answer only for work or my uncle who checked in for Detroit. On the coldest night of January, a breaker tripped in a near West Side condo, and I worked in silence while a couple argued in the next room about splitting an Uber. When I finished, the woman handed me a to-go container of gumbo. "You look like you could use a hot meal," she said. I cried in my truck, hand on the steering wheel, surprised by how far a simple kindness could reach. I ate slowly, tasting every spice. When I was done, I stared at my calloused hands, and a thought arrived. If rooms can decide who fits, I need to own a room. Mr. Coleman, an older master electrician who once ran his own shop in Chatham, found me killing time outside the Union Hall and asked why I looked like a man watching a door that never opened. I told him everything, in the clipped voice you use when shame crowds your throat. He listened. Then he said, "You break your back for the drywall, son. Own the dirt." He pressed a used paperback into my palm about mortgages and liens. "There's a way to hold the paper, even when they won't sell you the building," he added. It sounded like a riddle and a map. I started spending nights at the Harold Washington Library, the downtown floors warm and quiet like a winter church. I read about notes and assignments, balloon payments and distress debt, cap rates, NOI. I asked questions of librarians who had seen men like me before, eyes hungry, dignity ragged, something unbroken, still moving inside. I took a continuing education class at Harold Washington College taught by a banker who wore brown shoes with navy suits and talked about risk like it was whether you could read if you paid attention. The first time I bought anything, it was smaller than my rage, a two-flat in Bronzeville, inherited by three siblings who couldn't agree on a plan. The plumbing stuttered, the kitchen cabinets were sprung, and a leak stained the ceiling with a pattern like a map of a country that never existed. I lived in the garden unit while I renovated the upstairs. Work grounded me. Measure, cut, install. Sleep on a borrowed mattress. Eat oatmeal for dinner. Run wire like veins. On Sundays, I sat in an empty living room and let silence foam around me until it didn't feel like drowning. Tasha's world remained polished and distant. I saw her once at a Whole Foods in Hyde Park, standing by the floral section with a bouquet like sunlight in her hands. She looked through me as if I were a reflection in a bus window. "Stay away from my life," she said, not raising her voice, just shaping the air in a way that made other shoppers glance up. Langston waited near the self-checkout, tapping a card against his palm. There was no apology in her face, just a woman curating a gallery and removing pieces that no longer matched the show. I didn't date. I didn't drink. I worked. Every dollar had a job. Mortgage, repairs, tools, savings. I fixed a two-flat, then a bungalow in South Shore that smelled like old lilacs and damp carpet. A banker named Monique Freeman at a community development credit union in Bronzeville took time to explain underwriting like a patient aunt. "You have discipline," she said. "What you need is leverage." I nodded like I understood fully, then went home and looked up every term she used. Sometimes survival is a dictionary and a decision not to quit. When spring arrived, I was back on Lake Michigan's edge before dawn. I watched joggers cut the wind and gulls drift like stubborn kites. The country club sat far north in Winnetka, where manicured lawns said money without using words. Once, I drove past the iron gate at dusk and felt my hand shake without touch. I parked on a side street, heart thudding, and told myself that exclusion is a room with mirrors. If you stare long enough, you forget the door behind you. I started listing what I did have. A clean toolbox, a paid light bill, 2 tenants who called me Mr. Ellison. The first whisper about Lakeshore Crest being in trouble came 5 years after the day they banned me. A supplier wrung his hands in my kitchen and said the club's last renovation contractor hadn't been paid on time. Monique, the banker, later confirmed that the club's lender had packaged its loan among others they wanted off their books. "Balloon payment this summer," she said. "If they can't refinance, someone with cash and stomach could buy the note." I stirred my coffee and felt a quiet click in my chest. Paper. Ownership in a different kind of ink. I formed an LLC, South Shore Holdings. I hired an attorney, Aaliyah Benton, sharp, calm, with a memory like a vault, to structure it so my name would not show. She looked at me over rimless glasses and asked, "Are you trying to get even or get free?" I surprised myself by answering honestly, "Free." She nodded once, satisfied. "Then we'll be precise." We combed through the loan file. There were compliance gaps small enough to matter. There were covenants the club tiptoed around. There were small liabilities that would grow angry when stared directly. The night before we submitted our bid for the note, I sat in my truck in front of the old two-flat and thought about sleeping here in winters, the painter's tarp wrapped around my bones like a private promise. I thought about Tasha's text that first week, "Stay away from my life." It no longer cut. It opened. I had stayed away from her life and arrived at my own. The bid went out in the morning. A clean number with funds parked in escrow, proof that I had learned to move quieter than my hunger. We won. The bank's email arrived with the dry warmth of a gas heater, and then the lender transfer documents landed with the thud of reality. I owned the paper, not the property, but paper is power when the borrower is a club with a clock ticking. Aaliyah guided me through the notices like a choreographer learning a stubborn piece. We set a tone, firm, professional, absent of malice. I kept my hand steady by fixing a crooked banister in the South Shore bungalow between emails. The wood taught me that straight is not a feeling. It is a measurement. Langston's name was everywhere in the board minutes we reviewed, fundraising galas, membership initiatives, an emphasis on maintaining standards. Tasha's name appeared softer, in event photos and committee rosters. Neither name carried apologies. The club tried to refinance, but rates were no longer the gentle river they had once been. Their appraisals looked like a mirror angled to hide blemishes. The balloon payment drew close. I approved a short extension with conditions that required a full operations audit by an independent firm. They signed. Entitlement rarely anticipates math. The audit arrived in boxes. Invoices that never met a stamp. A valet contract awarded to a cousin. A pattern of inadvertent, unpaid assessments by select members, including board officers, quietly forgiven with a wave that looked like courtesy but smelled like rot. And there it was, documented harassment of grounds crew staff, most of them black, nearly all from the South and West sides, written off as tone issues, cultural misunderstandings. I read every line twice. You cannot fix the winter you suffered, but you can salt the right sidewalks. We enforce policy. Not loudly, precisely. Delinquent balances had to be cured for renewals. Harassment findings triggered formal consequences under the club's own bylaws. I didn't blacklist anyone. I let their signatures do the work. Tasha and Langston received identical notices by certified mail, pending non-renewal subject to outstanding assessments and code of conduct violations. This was not revenge as spectacle. This was a ledger squaring itself, with my hand only at the edge to keep the paper flat. Opening weekend approached. The gatehouse posted a new list in a binder with plastic sleeves. Active members in green, pending renewals in yellow, closed in red. At 9:12 a.m., Tasha pulled up in a white SUV with a lacquered smile and a golf skirt the color of fresh limes. Langston followed in a dark sedan, jaw set, sunglasses reflecting the pines. The guard scanned the key cards. Red light. He tried again. Red. He flipped to the binder, followed the line with his finger, and lifted his eyes, trained by the policies I had insisted they be trained on. "I'm sorry," he said evenly. "Your renewals were not approved." Tasha laughed like a test balloon. "You must be mistaken." The guard showed the letter, the signatures, the balances due, the conduct findings. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask for clarity. She moved to anger, so cleanly it looked like dance. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, which was the oldest sentence in rooms like these. He nodded without nodding. "Yes, and I know what the bylaws say." Langston stepped forward, softer menace, "Call the manager." The manager came, wearing neutrality like armor. He cited policy. He did not name me. That was the point. I wasn't there. I was home in Hyde Park, stirring a pot of red beans, and watching the steam twist into a ribbon like a new language. My phone buzzed with an email, the renewal report I'd asked to review after the fact. I opened it. I recognized their names. I recognized the payroll entries for the raises we'd folded into the grounds crew's budget. I recognized the scholarship line item for caddies from Southside high schools headed to city colleges, a quiet give back I had insisted on without attaching my name. The temptation to drive north, to see the red key lights with my own eyes, flickered and died. I turned off the stove, ladled beans over rice, and ate at my small table by the window. A kid on a scooter flashed past. A neighbor sang along to an old soul track upstairs. My hand stopped humming with the old need for witnesses. Sometimes the only audience that matters is the part of you that survived long enough to see the door unlock from the inside. Word traveled, but not far. The club sent the standard notice to members summarizing the audit's policy changes. People grumbled in the way people grumble when the wind shifts and the leaves no longer fall the direction they prefer. I went for a walk through Jackson Park and watched herons test the surface of the lagoon. I passed a couple arguing softly about grocery lists and felt no spike of adrenaline, only a small prayer for them to give each other the gentler version of their voices. Tasha did not call me. She posted photos from a different club a month later, one with a shorter waiting list and a shabbier gate. Her captions grew more brittle, the smile tighter, like saran wrap pulled too hard across a bowl. Langston stayed out of pictures. A friend told me he'd taken a leave from a board in Evanston to spend time on personal matters, which I read as paperwork. None of it brought me pleasure in the sugar sense. It tasted like clean water after salt. Necessary, not sweet. My transformation wasn't cinematic. It was calendars and budgets, and an alarm I stopped snoozing. It was paying vendors early because once I had begged for that mercy. It was underwriting a tool allowance for the grounds crew, so the men who kept the greens cut perfect had blades that didn't chatter. It was letting the new general manager, a black woman from Oak Park named Renee, run the place without interference while giving her the authority the bylaws had always promised but never enforced. It was learning to live without heavy doors in my chest. I found an old photo of me and Tasha taken on our first anniversary, framed in thrift store gold, buried in a box I hadn't opened since the muffler shop. We were laughing, the kind that bend your neck back. I studied a long time. Two people who had not yet learned how far a word can wound, how far a gate can reach. I didn't smash the frame. I slid the photo into a folder marked past, taped it shut, and put on a high shelf. The folder didn't weigh anything anymore. The next winter, I replaced a breaker in Mrs. Danielle's apartment over on Cottage Grove. She was 81, sharp-eyed, with a laugh that scolded you into better posture. When I finished, she asked what I did for myself that had nothing to do with work. I said I walk. She nodded like I passed a test. Keep walking, she said. Don't let old fire burn new rooms. I wrote it down when I got home. Some advice is a warm coat. Some is a key. In spring, the Caddy Scholarship Committee met at a diner in Rogers Park, and I took a booth in the back while the chair, a retired teacher from Morgan Park, ran the numbers. I listened to a 17-year-old talk about night shifts and physics homework, another about nursing school and her mother's arthritis. I felt the old ache and the new gratitude share a table without arguing. When the bill came, I paid it before anyone noticed. I left through the kitchen door because it was closer to the alley and I never needed a center aisle again. Aaliyah called to tell me a legal housekeeping matter required my signature. Everything's stable, she said, which was her way of saying we had built our house on bedrock. Monique sent me a link to a continuing education seminar on portfolio risk. I signed up and took notes like I was learning to breathe. Mr. Coleman showed up at the bungalow one Saturday with a sack of barbecue and ate on my stoop, telling stories about the time somebody wired a garage with speaker wire. We laughed until we coughed. We didn't talk about clubs. I still drive past the lake sometimes, early when the city is soft. I park facing the water and drink coffee from a thermos that smells like every morning I didn't quit. I think about rooms and doors and paper. I think about the work that doesn't show, repairing the studs inside a wall so the paint has something honest to hang on. I think about Tasha's sentence and how it used to be a knife and is now just a sentence. Stay away from my life. I did, and it saved me. If you're looking for a victory lap, I don't have one. I have a quiet driveway and a habit of buying new socks before the old ones thin. I have a list of vendors who know I answer the phone. I have a grounds crew that doesn't flinch when the board walks by, because policy is no longer a weapon, but a handrail. I have my name on nothing at Lakeshore Crest, and my fingerprints on everything that keeps it honest. I have peace that doesn't ask for witnesses. The last time I drove past the club, it was evening, and the pines were black against a pink sky. The gate lights pulsed their patient green. A couple in tennis whites walked to their car, complaining gently about the humidity. I kept going. A block later, I pulled over and rolled down the window. A breeze came in carrying cut grass and lake air. I thought of the boy who slept in a truck, the man who learned new words in a bright library, the hands that wired their way back to steadiness. Then I drove home. There was dinner to make, and tomorrow's work to plan, and a life that, finally, belonged to me. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.